Yes, hello everyone. Welcome back to another video here on Cluiche. With me, Séamus Brady, your host, and for this time I'm joined by Jason Keelan from the Loaf Pod GAA podcast. We have a cracking weekend of action ahead of us, Jason, don't we? I mean, the All-Ireland Senior Football Club semi-finals. We have the sequel of probably the most talked about All-Ireland Club football final that I've ever seen anyway. I think it's fair to say we have part 2 taking place this weekend between Glen and Crokes. It's going to be one of the most watched club games I think there has been. But then on top of that, we've also had the pre-season competitions kick off, the O'Byrne Cup, the FBL League, like all the pre-season competitions, they're all kicking off this week. So we'll run through them as well. But in general, how would you find the new year? How would you find the whole Christmas break? Back into it now for the new year.
Yeah, it's Christmas has been busy enough, but excited that finally getting back to some action. I know the New York hurler started off pretty well last night against Leitrim, and two Westmeath men. The two Loughlin Stones were part of the big victory over Leitrim. There was a rematch of last year's Shield final as well. So I'm glad for New York getting back up and running. Not a lot of people know a lot about their hurling history, but they have beaten Wexford and Kilkenny in the past, and they have an All-Ireland under-21, I think, title under their belt. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to club games, looking forward to county, my own setup here in Westmeath, looking forward to see what Desi Dolan does and what Joe Fortune does as well in the hurling. So yeah, it's cracking. I'm looking forward to it all. It's great to be back.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like turn of the year is weirdly the most busy part. If you're talking about covering the games, you still have the club championship, you have the previews for the year. You actually have the preseason competitions already underway, and then you have the Allianz League right around the corner as well. So it's going to be a busy month here on Cluiche, and I'd say exactly the same on the Loaf Pod as well. Like when you're talking about other, like Waterford had a fairly feisty contest to Kerry down in the Munster preseason hurling competition. And obviously we have to talk about when it comes to the O'Byrne Cup, there's action on today in the O'Byrne Cup as well, which, you know, we'll post the results of on our Instagram page. Go check that out if you haven't already. But Wexford and Wicklow, obviously a floodlight failure right at the start of the year. The game has to be pushed back. So it had to be pushed back for the Halo Tile Centre of Excellence. And the throw-in had to be pushed back as well. And Wexford, when the game actually did happen, Wexford won fairly comfortably, 4-15 to 2-12. But not exactly an ideal start to the season. Like when you're talking about it, and like that is a photo when the game eventually did get underway. But I mean, as I said, floodlight failure, game had to be moved to somewhere that was about a half-hour drive away. Throw-in time had to be moved back. Not the ideal start to your preseason competition.
No, definitely not. But I suppose it's probably better to get these things out of the way early on in the year rather than happening in a championship game or something. And I don't think it'll have bothered either side too much. Obviously for Wicklow, Bushy McConville, having to deal with a lot of immigration issues from what I've been told, and has lost a few players as well. So it's going to be tricky enough for him. Of course, I think I'm trying to remember. I think Westmeath meet Wicklow at some stages. Leinster, I think we've got them first in Leinster, and two men who've played against each other in the past, Desi and Oisín, and be interesting to see how they both cope with. Westmeath have obviously lost lads as well, but yeah, not the ideal start for a game with the floodlights. But you'd hope that any issues would be ironed out fairly quick, and that it is pre-season for a reason. It's pre-season to fix all the issues in more ways than one, on and off the pitch, really. So, but yeah, look, they got to play it, and probably the expected result, really. I don't see Wicklow being, I say that now, of course, I don't see Wicklow being all that fantastic. It'll probably be Westmeath somehow, though. But yeah, no, not the ideal start for anybody.
Well, Westmeath are a tricky team to predict. They always put it up to the big teams, and then they always seem to make heavy work out of beating teams that they really should beat as well at the same time. But yeah, preseason competitions underway. The results are being posted across several different pages across Instagram, so do keep up with it as well there. But this episode is primarily to preview the weekend's club action, and we are going to move on to what is the game that everybody's talking about, the game that everybody cannot wait to see. Glen, Kilmacud, Crokes, the sequel. This is like, when you're talking about what build-up this game has. When you remember what happened last year, I mean, the whole country was talking about that in the aftermath when people realised that Kilmacud had more than 15 players on the pitch for the final play of the game. People were saying the game should have been replayed. It looked for a while like it might be replayed because Glen obviously filed an official appeal. In the end, the game wasn't replayed and Crokes were left as All-Ireland club football champions. And now they get to go at it again in the All-Ireland semi-final. I mean, you couldn't ride it really, could you?
No, and in some ways I'm kind of glad it's the semi-final and not the final all over again, because with Kilmacud winning 3 in a row, I think Glen doing back-to-back, there's possibly enough that kept happening to be a sense of like Dublin and Leinster kind of thing where people just get a little bit, fed up with the same. But the fact it's a semi-final, I think is great, and obviously BRIGIDS and Castlehaven waiting in the wing for whoever wins it. It's the 50th year, I think, of the American Cup as well. Someone was saying, I think it started in '74. So it's going to be a cracker. Kilmacud probably won't need 16 men this time around. I reckon that they might just nip it by a couple of points again, a bit like it was last year. I thought it wasn't great. They're not coming in with, great reputation. Kilmacud, the two biggest stories they probably had have been the 16 man and then not fielding the team for the game against Ballyboden when they are the, one of, if not the biggest club in the country. So, and then of course they've all the side stories about Shane Walsh and the money behind all that. But like, it's nothing new. They've had plenty of external faces. I remember being in college and Brian Kavanagh was trained to be a teacher, and he was, come up from Longford. He was playing with them. I think Adrian Morrissey from Wexford, was someone else. Kevin Diaz, of course, came from Armagh in the AFL and was playing with them. So it's not like it's the only place that it happens, but people do like to try and beat down a team who are winning. It's a real Irish thing to do. So they've got so many sticks been thrown at them between 16th man, not feeling for the final, Shane Walsh, etc. That they're probably delighted in some ways, that people are throwing all this at them. Glen will also be delighted, of course, because it takes a bit off them. I don't know. I don't want to go into predictions too early. I'll probably say a few more things. I'll probably change my mind, but I fancy Kilmacud. They're just on a bit of a roll at the moment as a club, and they're going to be impossible to stop, I think, really.
Well, that's it. When you're talking about, when you're talking about the neutrals watching this game and the people that don't really have a horse in the race, a lot of the neutrals are going to be rooting for Glen to win this game because Kilmacud Crokes, I said, what kicked off the Shane Walsh thing, in my opinion, what kicked off the All-Ireland final controversy to another level was the fact that it was Kilmacud Crokes. Like, I'm not... They are seen as close to a professional club as you could possibly have. They did bring in Shane Walsh a couple of weeks after he kicked 9 points in the All-Ireland final. And a lot of people were unhappy about that. And a lot of people were saying, Kilmacud Crokes shouldn't get to win that final. There was a lot of people in comments on my videos who were really unhappy that they felt like Kilmacud were just going to get away with this. And the reality is they kind of did. Like, they were left with the All-Ireland Championship. And the reality is, if that player wasn't on the pitch, would Glen have scored a goal? No. But you can't open the door to teams leaving players on, knowing that they might be able to get away with it. So that was a precarious situation for the GAA. I think time has healed that a little bit, and people have kind of been like, okay, well, storm's blown over a little bit. But it'll be very interesting to see if any controversy happens in this game between the two sides. What we're going to do is we're going to run through each team. We're going to run through them team by team, and then I'm going to say, have they improved? Have they not improved? What's different about them this year? And then what can we expect? Prediction. So we'll start with Glen. Glen's top scorer. So big, massive, massive shout out to Matthew Hurley, the Gaelic Statsman. I mean, go follow him if you don't already. Anything stats related in the GAA, he's the man to go to. I have up here, he has the top scorers for Glen and Kilmacud Crokes. So Danny Talon is Glen's top scorer with 2-7. And most of that has come from placed balls. Now, the catch is most of these scores are only from the Kilray game onwards. But from that onwards, Emmett Bradley's hit 12 points, Conor Glass has hit 1-6, Ethan Doherty, Jack Doherty, Una Mulholland have all hit 6 points each. Cahill Mulholland hit 1-2. Colin McGuckian 4 points. Kieran McFall 3. Stevie O'Hara, Michael Warnock, Jody McDermott with 2. Conor Convery, Colin Bradley, Conor Carville, Tina Flanagan, and Ryan Duggan all with 1. So the first thing that you notice there is they don't have a Shane Walsh type scorer. They don't have someone that is the marquee forward. They don't have a Shane Walsh or a Paul Mannion, or I would argue even a Darren Mullen. They don't have your hang your hat on them forward. Danny Talon is the closest that they have to that. They're a very smooth, well-oiled, well-drilled machine. And they get the ball to the right player at the right time to take the shot. They're not as reliant on a couple of players as Kilmacud Crokes are to get the scores for them. And when you look, like, you can see that when you look through their scores. In Derry, they beat Canis's 115-9. They beat Lavey 18-14. They beat Owen Rua 19-7. Glen, they beat Michael Davitz by 214-3-9. They beat Ballinascreen 17-3. Balahi by 412-111. Glen then beat Kilray 211-9. Beat Sloughneel 15-6 and beat O'Donovan Ross in the Derry final 113-7. In Ulster, they beat Cargan 11 points to 7. They beat Nave Connell 10 points to 1-6, and they beat Scottstown 13 points to 11 in the Ulster final. So their average conceded is 599. That's 10 points a game. Their average scored is 112 a game. 13 goals and 138 points that they've got. Now, again, massive shout out to Matthew. That's all from him. Yeah. But the reality is, when you look at those stats, immediately what jumps off to me is something that we pretty much all know about Glen. They win by controlling the game. They win by making you play on their terms, and they are better at eking out the scores, scraping out the scores, getting the scores at the key moments than you are. And that's kind of how that they've won these games. Although the Scottstown one was an exception to the rule. That was a brilliant game.
Yeah. It's almost like a Malachy O'Rourke playbook, or probably an Ulster playbook, you would have to say. It's as you said, it's on our terms. And Malachy O'Rourke has been doing that forever. Didn't he win the All-Ireland with like Loop or someone like that 20 or more odd years ago as well? The thing against Scottstown, I think the best thing they did against Scottstown was stopping Rory Beggan from having too many chances. There were no, they didn't give away stupid frees. They didn't give away many 45s. And then I thought their best player was Una Mulholland. Brilliant player. He's been called into the Derry squad as far as I know. He could have had a goal or two. He kicked 3 points. Ethan Doherty is the young player of the year as well, I think, isn't he? And then you have McFall, Glass. Even the keeper, I thought, as a former goalkeeper, I'm always looking at goalkeepers, but Conor Bradley is pretty handy in goals, made a good save at the end as well to deny the goal. I think the other thing I have to mention as well is last year's final team still has 13 of those this year, and they started against Scottstown. And then obviously you've got McFall coming back in as well. So they're just...
How big is he coming back in?
It's just experience more than anything, and the fact that he's been away and come back, and some people have been there, might be, there's almost a kind of sense of I have to go all over again, whereas for him it's almost like, deadly, I get a crack at this now. It's kind of new for him in some ways after being away for a while, and just the fact that they have Conor Glass in there as well, like how many players has he worked like on a team? Any team in Ireland would give their left leg to have him in there. And then the other side, I suppose, everything as well, is that they are defensively so solid. I know they can, the scores there that Matthew is up, they do concede quite a bit, but they have the array of scorers, and as I said, they're not relying on a Shane Walsh. It's just such a spread. I think they had 7 or 8 different scorers from play against Scottstown out of the 13 that they got. They're an all-round kind of team, and there's not going to be a headline, of a Shane Walsh kicking 1-8 or whatever. So I think that kind of suits. It'll suit them a little bit, but then they have to do the job on Shane Walsh. There's no getting away from that either. And whether they can do that or not, is another question as well. You probably have Kilmacud scores, I'd say, from Matthew as well, have you?
Kilmacud Crokes, yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I have them here.
Yeah,
but Oh no, 100%. Like I'll get to that in a minute. But when we're talking about Kieran McFall, like to go back to him, people were saying in the comments before that game, and they were saying after that game, that if Kieran McFall was around, Glen would have won. Simple as. They were just saying Kieran McFall is that good that if he had been playing for Glen that day, they would have beaten Kilmacud Crokes in that final. Now, we can't know that. Would he have made Glen better if he was on that pitch? Yes, he would have. Like McFall at his best makes Glen better. He makes Derry better. He makes most teams better. But the reality is that you can't automatically say that Glen would have beaten Crokes that day. Because here's the thing that a lot of people don't like to say, but here's the truth. Kilmacud were the better team that day. They deserved to win that final. They were the better team on the day. And you can like argue about what happened at the end, and Crokes shouldn't have done what they did at the end, leaving the extra man on. There's a load of confusion, and they really messed up there. But the reality is, for the 60 minutes, they were the better team. And if you take that last play out of it, not one person would be saying Glen should have won that game. People would be saying that Glen didn't turn up and play to their level, which they didn't. I've definitely seen Glen play better. They got the goal immediately, and it felt like they kind of got a bit giddy or something, and Crokes took over from that point for long periods of the game. And they were the better side.
Yeah, and I think Malik O'Rourke recently enough in an interview kind of admitted that. Now, I don't know who wrote the article, but they kind of said, it's almost like been in the panto, is it, do you believe him or do you not? Is it just a way of playing down a story maybe that I'm sure still bothers them deep down? It bothers everybody, I'm sure, associated with them. But yeah, no, Kieran McFall, yeah, you're right. He would have made a difference, but we'll never know if it would have altered the game. The game would have been, every play would have been different, and you could argue on the other hand, Kilmacud, missed a couple of, points, opportunities that they probably could have got themselves, and, the odd bad shot selection here and there. We'll never know, but what he does do is he changes teams and he changes Glen, and he offers kind of more, what would you say, there's an encouragement there for others, particularly some of the younger guys in the team, when they see him and the warhorse attitude that he brings, they up their game as well to try and keep up with him. And the fact you've got Conor Glass doing likewise means you have a double reason to up your game and push for your team. And certainly it'll be an interesting one. But yeah, you're right. He brings a different dynamic to the team, and Glen are better off for him.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Like he's come back in and he's right away slotted into being one of their top three players immediately. Like I think their best three players, me personally, I think it's Glass, Bradley, and McFall. Ethan Doherty, as well, makes that a 4 in my opinion, because I can't really rule any of them out. But they're the guys that make them tick. And Danny Talon is a key finisher for them. Like, when you're talking about the game last year, and we're going to get into why this would be different, we'll get into where the venue is. We'll get into where this game is going to be played. We'll move now to Kilmacud Crokes. So Kilmacud Crokes, their top scorer, no surprise here, is Shane Walsh. 4 goals and 33 points Shane Walsh has scored from the start of the Dublin Championship up until now. Paul Mannion is second with 26 points. So, I mean, the difference between Shane Walsh and Mannion is insane. Dara Mullen has hit 14 points, Keane O'Connor with 12, Shane Cunningham with 1-9, Hugh Kenny then with 3 goals and 2 points, Shane Horn with 1-6. And I won't keep going down to the bottom, but those are the top scorers for Kilmacud. They're the top 7 that they have. Now, again, that's massively different to Glen's top scorers, because you have 2 out and out at the top, Mannion and Walsh, that everybody knows are the 2 that you have to stop. But the question is, how on earth do you stop them? Michael Warnock is a good man marker. He's probably more likely they're going to sweep. Ryan Duggan might take one of them. Cathal Mulholland will definitely be put onto one of them. But if you are Glen, like a Malik O'Rourke, how on earth do you even go about stopping them 2?
Do you try and stop them, or do you try and outscore them? But it's very tricky, I think, for the likes of an Ulster team, and particularly like Glen, to outscore them, or do you just try and shut them down in true kind of Ulster fashion, and just kill the game completely as a a scoring contest. Glen, I suppose, will take a little bit of heart going forward from the fact that Alex Byrne for Nace and Dara Kerwin were both very, very strong and really gave, well, Andy McGowan had a tough day at the office anyway. But I don't know how you stop Shane Walsh. And, you know, all the headlines will be about, oh, you know, and paying him money to do this. And it is disappointing in some ways because Kilmacud is a team have expanded so much. They've had such success at Fela level and underage that it's probably frustrating for some of the younger members who maybe will be hoping to be on the team, and then they, you know, pay X amount of money to bring in this lad from Galway. You know, he is, you know, one of the best footballers in the country. But how do you stop him? I don't know. You can put Warnock on him and see, but it'll probably be like when, you know, my club, the Downs, tried to stop him. You end up having 3 or 4 different lads on him in the space of 60 minutes, and in most of the time, none of them work. You just keep chopping and changing, lads. He'd just keep doing what he does anyway. He'll come out the field if he needs to. He'll stay in there if he needs to. He'll pick the ball up in his own half and, you know, score into an empty net at the end if he needs to. Like, it doesn't really. I don't think it matters too much to Shane Walsh. I don't think it matters too much to Kilmacud. They'll play their own game, and whatever, you know, tactical switches they need to make, they'll make. Be interesting to see if Malachy O'Rourke, you know, sticks Warnock on him and says, you know, your job is just to mark him, because they can play so defensive that they could put 2 or 3 on him, you know, and hope that like Diaz and Cunningham and the others don't have much of an impact then if they can shut them down further out the field. And it's saying that the other option then is to stop the ball getting into him in the first place, which is probably more likely what they will do. They probably line up, you know, their 15 men across when Kilmacud are attacking. They'll have their banks of 3 or 4 or 5 across the 45 and behind that again, and just stop the ball getting into him. Now, you know, remains to be seen how well that works, because we all know Shane Walsh is probably up there with David Clifford, you know, in players who can get away from their men and, you know, create a yard for a scoring opportunity. That's all he needs. And again, it's right foot, left foot, it doesn't matter. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of tactics both employ. Malachy O'Rourke is one for surprises. It's kind of, this is the way we do it, and that's how it's going to be. I don't know if Kilmacud will pull something up, you know, either sleeve, but I think Glen will go defensive, put the 15 behind the ball when Kilmacud are attacking, try and break out and get scores. I don't see a high scoring game. I think it might even be lower than the 113 to 111 last year. But how do you stop Shane Walsh? Well, it's anybody's guess. Nobody's managed to stop him yet. So now would be the ideal time, if you're a Glen supporter, to figure out how to stop him, or just how to stop the ball getting to him in the first place.
But that's it. Like, and the reality is Crokes this year, whenever he comes on, they just get better. And one thing that's an interesting stat that I have noticed is Crokes and Glen have both, on average, scored 5 points more than they have conceded. Both of them have an average winning margin of 5 points. Right. So, like, they've been very similar in how they've got to this stage. The only difference is Crokes have had a real wobble this year. Like, they really looked like they were about to go out at the Dublin semi-finals. Like, I was working with Dublin GA this year, like, absolutely honoured to have done some work with them there. In the Dublin Championship, they beat Sylvester's in the first round 14 points to 2-5. That was a bit of an arm wrestle of a game, but Crokes just had their noses in front from start to finish. They beat Castleknock in a bit of a mad game, 4-11 to 114, and we were all thinking, right, Crokes looked like they were conceding a lot, but they were also scoring a lot going forward as well. Then they beat Skerries 117 to 17 points, and Skerries had them on the ropes at the end, where they were firing high ball in on top of them. Crokes dealt with it, but at the end of the game, you could tell Robbie Brennan wasn't exactly over the moon that they had ended up in a position where they were fighting for their lives. Like, his post-match interview showed that. And then came the Ballymun Kickham's game. They won 14 points to 10, not too much fuss there. And then came the Raheny game. And it was like, in the Ballymun Kickham's game, they were more or less able to make Ballymun play on their terms. And when they do that, they sometimes tend to coast. And they definitely got caught coasting against Raheny, because out of nowhere, Raheny hit them for 1-2 or something, and we're right on their tail and we're in front. And with the last kick of the game, Crokes were 3 points behind, and Luke Ward fires it into the net to save them. The last kick of the game, he saves them. Game goes to extra time. Raheny had their chances to win. It goes to penalties after finishing 2-15 each after extra time. And Crokes slot all 5 of the penalties away. Like, you can't argue with that. A 5 out of 5 from the penalties, really, really well done. And then they smashed Ballyboden to pieces in the final. I predicted that they would beat Ballyboden. I didn't think they'd win that easy, but they won 114 to 9 points. We've all seen Shane Walsh's goal. That's him hitting top form. Then they go into Leinster, 112 to 4 points. They beat Era Oak. 116 to 111. They beat RD St. Mary's. And they beat Naas 114 to 10 points in the Leinster final, which flattered them a bit. Naas were right there with them from start to finish, and Crokes put the burners on at the end. Shane Walsh got the goal. It made it look a lot more comfortable than it actually was. But the point is when you look at Crokes, no Ben Shovlin. Craig Diaz is nowhere near as fit as he was this time last year. Conor Casey hasn't really been around. He was a big midfield player for them down through the years. Andrew McGowan was away, then he came back. Is he at his best? No. Killian O'Shea, we haven't seen him. And like, he's a defender who had been on Dublin squads and all down through the years. He is a really, really good player. They are different to how they were last year. And what the key thing is I mentioned is Ben Shovlin and Conor Casey and the fitness of Craig Diaz. That's all midfielders. That's all what has been their first choice midfield for the last 5 years. They're going in here against the Glen side in a provincial ground who are so strong around the middle. McFall, Glass, Bradley. You have a relatively new midfield pairing there in Rory O'Carroll and Brian Sheehy. And you're thinking to yourself, Mark O'Leary has played in there too and has done really well. But this is a hell of a test. Like, this is as difficult a club midfield as you're going to come up against. It's basically Derry's midfield.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I'm trying to remember, I was at that. Castleknock was my local club when I lived in Dublin for 12, 13 years. I'm pretty sure I was at that game all right in the championship. And then I think we were all a bit disappointed at the final, the Ballyboden game. It was kind of it wasn't anything to write home about, really. It was a bit like when TG Carr came to Westmeath for the Westmeath County Final and it ended up 9-7. It was the worst game ever. So it wasn't as bad as that, but it certainly wasn't very entertaining. But for people who maybe hadn't seen much of Shane Walsh, before, it was probably good for them to get to see, what he's like, as you said, in top form. The Naas game definitely was flattering on the scoreboard, and the goal at the end obviously, puts a nice cherry on the top. But Naas probably had chances to probably, take them down. And I just said Kilmacud have been different. Yeah, it's probably the word used, probably the best word to use, because Glen have got 13 of their 15 from last year. Kilmacud certainly don't, and it's kind of showing a little bit that you do need the bit of settled kind of team, to fight for the top honours, and Glen had that, whereas Kilmacud, as you said, are missing names and the lack of fitness. Yeah, Craig Diaz is an interesting one. I have heard a couple of people, or I've read a couple of people on forums chatting about that as well. And the Andy McGowan thing, I suppose I didn't look too closely at it till I read a bit about it online, and then I realised, he did get a bit of a run around at times from Alex Byrne, and maybe that doesn't put Kilmacud in the best kind of shape. And going up to Newry is going to be great crack.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much of a difference does that make from the fact that they played in Croke Park last year and now they're playing in Newry?
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot tighter. It's going to be a lot more physical.
It's going to be a lot muckier.
Yeah, and that doesn't allow the open space for Shane Walsh to run the way that he did against Naas, the way that he did against Ballyboden, because Glen won't let him do that.
Yeah,
it's the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, this is cooked up for Glen, because it's a lot closer to them. Yeah. They are going to travel for that game. They have revenge on their mind to take out Crokes. And there's no team that would love to beat them more than Glen.
Yeah, and as you say, Jed, the more even I said at the start about Kilmacud, been fancy, the more I'm now swaying to Glen as we speak. So it's going to be mucky. You're not going to have the, no offense to any of the ground staff up in Park Esler, but it's a completely different place. I went up there for a Westmeath game before, and it's nice and narrow. It doesn't suit that expansive football at all. It would suit Glen putting 15 behind the ball because they will have less ground to cover in their defensive slots. And yeah, you're putting everything against Kilmacud. It's exactly what they don't want to play in. They're going to be in a little kind of cauldron because obviously Glen are going to, I would suggest, are going to outnumber support-wise. It won't just be Glen people. It'll be people who just want to, an Ulster team for a bit of revenge, basically, is what they're looking for. And to see the Dubs taken down, just what a lot of people outside of Dublin, want, whether it's club or county. And yeah, as you said, it's been a stumble. But for a lot of people, like you will know, having been at most of the championship games, I've been fortunate to be at a couple of them, having lived in Dublin as well and gone back up and still teaching there. But for anyone who just saw Kilmacud and Ballyboden, will think, Kilmacud they'll wipe the floor, with Glen. It'll be handy. Shane Walsh is going to knock the lights out completely, and it's not going to be like that at all. Like if he gets his scores, he's going to have to earn them. And it's now that we say it, it's actually ideal for Glen to shut him off and stop the ball getting in there. It's actually only when you say it's in Uri that you realise, God, this is actually a completely different setup altogether.
Yeah, and look, we've talked about it now for about 20 minutes. It's time to put our money where our mouth is. We've talked about Glen, we've talked about Kilmacud Crokes. Here we go. Official prediction: Kilmacud Crokes versus Watty Graham's Glen. Jason, I'm going to go to you first. Pick Kilmacud or Glen. Bear in mind the game's in Uri.
Yeah, I'm going to change what I said at the start. I probably came in a little bit kind of naive at the start with going Kilmacud and expecting them. But the more we've chatted over the last 20 minutes, kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I'm going to go Glen in a low-scoring game. Like an exact score, something like 11-9, 11-10, something along that lines. I'll probably be proven completely wrong. To be a goal in the first 5 seconds, and I'll be completely wrong. But something low scoring, Glen to win. And I think Una Mulholland, I think, could be the quiet difference between the teams. I think he's a great footballer and is not going to get much of the headlines because of McFall, Glass, Talon, etc., and Doherty. And I think he could be the kind of subtle difference. He could get a couple of scores that could win the game. But I'll go with Glen to win in a low-scoring affair on a mucky pitch.
Okay. Yeah, I am going to go with Glen as well. And I can't believe that I'm doing that. Because I went with Kilmacud from the start. But as you said, when you talk about it and when you realise it's in Uri, when you realise that Glen have definitely been planning for Kilmacud for ages now, for a year, and when you think about who Crokes are missing from last year, they're missing Ben Shovlin, Craig Diaz isn't 100% fit. The ground is going to be tight. The weather is going to be awful. It's going to be a lot harder for Shane Walsh and Paul Mannion to get into their stride. And what we've noticed is in those battles, Glen, particularly in the provincial grounds, have more experience dogging out the win. They did it against Naomh Conaill with Emmett Bradley getting that last minute point. They battled past Carrigan. They battled past Scottstown. Kilmacud haven't really had to battle past anyone since the Raheny game. So I actually think Glen will get a goal. I think they'll get a goal in the first half and they'll win by like 1-8 to 10 points or something really tight, and they will absolutely love it. Look, I could be proved wrong. Kilmacud absolutely have the potential to prove me wrong, but I'm just going to go with Glen to get revenge. And I mean, what a result that will be for them, especially considering everything that happened last year. They will love that. Now, believe it or not, there is actually another semi-final taking place over the weekend. And this one is a cracker of a game as well. Munster champions Castlehaven are going up against Connacht champions St. Brigid's. And the one thing that I would say about this game is it's a battle of a team sorry, it's a battle between two teams that have already achieved far more than most people would have predicted that they would at the beginning of the year. Like, a lot of people fancied Nemo Rangers to beat Castlehaven in that Cork final, and a lot of people fancied Dingle to take Munster, and a lot of people fancied Clonmel Commercials to take Munster. Things like that. Castlehaven got to the final and absolutely showed the heart of lions in that final against Dingle to get over the line. You think that Michael Hurley went off injured. You think about the red card that they got, and they still battled to penalties and won on penalties. Damien Cahalane providing all the heroics you could ask for. Whereas St. Brigid's, on the other hand, a lot of people fancied Boyle to win in Roscommon. You know, they have the Smith brothers, Keane McKeown. Like, they have a load of really, really good players there. And then a lot of people would have fancied then Cur Finn to win Connacht, especially after they beat Moy Cullen in the Galway final. So a lot of people backed teams against these teams over the course of the championship. Yet here they are, Castlehaven as Munster champions, Brigid's as Connacht champions. Who's more confident going into this one? I mean, they both be backing themselves to make the final from here.
Yeah, they will. I suppose you kind of mentioned already, if Castlehaven, this is probably where Matthew would be the ideal man to have here. This one, talking about his beloved Cork teams, but I think it was probably nearly more impressive the way they got through Cork. It's probably as impressive or more impressive, because along the way in Cork they had to beat, I can't remember all the teams, but Ballincollig and Finbars were two they had to beat, who I thought Finbars would have been, a team that would have been fancied. The Dingle game was mental. Dingle should have won that in normal time, should have won it in extra time, and didn't.
Should have won on penalties as well. Thomas Sullivan had that penalty to win it.
Yeah, and then Damien goes and goals for the penalties. I was like, I can't remember too many outfielders. I remember here in the Westmeath Championship last year when the semi-final stage in the junior championship, one of the outfielders, it was the actual under-20 keeper, went in goals, and it took 22 penalties to end it. This was up there for kind of madness as well. And it's Dara Cahalane who's in goals normally, isn't it? I think for Castlehaven. So it was, Cahalane for Cahalane basically. It'd be great for Castlehaven, I think, to win this one. I know Brigid's have been, there before. They won the All Ireland, whatever, 10 or 11 years ago, I think, to beat Ballymun or someone like that. And I think the strong point for Castlehaven is the defensive line. I know that I'll be talking about Hurleys, etc., but I should really have written this down. So what happens when you have two young kids? You need to write things down, work your memory goes. But I think they kept Nemo to like 2 or 3 points from play in that game, which is quite astonishing as a stat. Matt will probably, correct me on that one, but I think it was 2 or 3 points from play was all that they let Nemo score. In a low-scoring battle, which is probably what we were saying about Glen and Kilmacud, are we going to get another one of them? I don't think this one will be a low-scoring battle. Brigid's beaten Cara Finn in the final. I don't think it was too much of a shock. I think Cara Finn have been very overly hyped this year, and I would have a good few friends down in Galway who would be diehard Galway. They'd follow their clubs in county to the moon and back. And all the talk they were saying, about Cara Finn was perhaps a little premature, that they're not quite back to the Cara Finn of the dominant days a few years ago. Obviously they had, Farrah Lundy, etc. But a lot of people who, saw the championship were saying they're not quite the same Cara Finn. And what Brigid's did very well, I know from watching the game back, was the kickouts. They forced Cara Finn into the kickout to go long, and Brigid's won quite a lot of them. I think at one point they won 3 in a row and kicked 3 points, off them. And that's kind of the turning point of the game for them. I think this is going to be an entirely different game to the other one. I expect a bit more free-flowing football, none of the Ulster, hopefully none of the Ulster defensive stuff that we'll expect to see from Glen. And potentially maybe the better of the two semi-finals. I don't know what you think, but I would certainly say this is probably, football-wise, probably going to be the better scoring game.
Maybe. It depends on the weather, I think, a lot as well. I think as well that there's a potential that they both might be really nervous. They've
Maybe,
got to
yeah.
this stage, and they might be really nervous about, not messing up at this stage, because they know that like the reality is that this is the easier side of the draw. It's not
Yeah.
a controversial thing to say. It's something that, look, I don't rule out either of these teams going on and beating whoever comes out of the other semi-final in the final. But I think if you had said to Castlehaven and St. Brigid's, who do you want to play in the All-Ireland semi-final? I think they both would have said each other.
Yeah.
So they're here now and they have a golden ticket to potentially reach the final. It's a winnable game for both of them. And I think they'll both be nervous, and I think there will be a couple of mistakes. When it comes to Castlehaven, like the last time they were in the semi-final, like, was a notorious game. I don't know if you remember 1997, Aaron's Isle, and then the whole Gianluca Vialli, Harry Redknapp series was off the back of that game, where a phantom goal kind of held Aaron's Isle on their way. Like issues like that. Whereas last time St. Brigid's were here, I know Curra Finn stopped them getting out of Galway, but last time that they were here in the All-Ireland semi-final stage, they went on to win it. They went on to win it, and they beat Ballymun-Kickhams in the final. And it was one of those things where, when you're talking about the difference, and the grain of rice can be a difference, being from a background and being from a club that has been there and done it, it does help on some level. It does help to have a team that has recently won the All-Ireland title, rather than a team that is trying to end, such a barren spell. I mean, just look at Mayo in Gaelic football. Like every year it's first All-Ireland in 70 years, first All-Ireland in 71 years, first All-Ireland in 72 years. And the wait just goes on and on and on. And with every year, the pressure seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas for Dublin in those games, they'd already won one. They'd already have 6-7 All-Irelands in their back pocket. So it's not really as much pressure on them. That it isn't really the end of the world if they don't win that final, for example. And what my point about that whole spiel is that if it comes down to a difference of a grain of rice between these two teams, St. Brigid's as a club have done it before. And there will be people in the backroom team. There will be people on the sideline. There will be people in the ear of these players who have been there and done it.
Yeah.
And that might help them. That little bit of confidence might just help them. Another key thing is, how fit is Michael Hurley?
Yeah. I suppose going back to the thing about the experience here, Brigid's, I know I've family down that neck of the woods, and I can't remember, they told me a while back, the backroom team, there is a couple of past, winners in there, and, they're obviously going to be vital to them on the sideline. And it is a factor when you can hang up in the dressing room, something from 2013, that shows, right, lads, this club has been here before. There's no reason we can't do it again. Whereas Castlehaven, it's a history book you're trying to pull out, to find something like that. It will have an impact. How fit Hurley is, I suppose we'll find out. Chances are, I haven't seen, teams or anything, but I'm sure be named in the team, and will he be there? Will he be not? I would say I don't know fitness wise what he is. I haven't heard anything really. Matthew will probably be the one he'll probably tell you an exact percentage of how fit he is at this stage. But it's going to be an important one for them. And then for Brigid's, how well Brian Stack plays can have a huge influence on the game. He was immense against Cara Finn, to the point that I think it went to his head near the end, where he started bulldozing his way up forward. I think he kicked a point. Somebody set up a point anyway. And then Brigid's are a bit like, in some ways, a bit of a kind of Shane Walsh. Ben O'Carroll is so central to everything that they do in attack. He got 1 something 5, 6, 7 or whatever it was against Cara Finn, which is quite a vast tally for one individual to get against Cara Finn. So,
Jason, he scored 7 goals and 29 points in the championship so far.
That probably
next up is a guy, Bobby Nugent, with 122, Kieran Sugu with 310. That's their top 3 scorers, and they are comfortably far ahead. They have Shane Kinnan and Eddie Nolan at midfield, Connor Hand, they've Ronan Stack, they've Brian Stack, Robbie Dolan. They have a lot of Roscommon experience in there. And just looking at the difference between the two sides, as you were saying, obviously for Castlehaven, it's the Hurleys, like Brian Hurley with 239, Michael Hurley with 23 points, Jack Callahan with 214, Mark Collins with 18 points. They're the top 4 scorers. But when you look at the scoreboards of these games, Brigid's have blitzed through.
Yeah.
Brigid's have blitzed through. Castlehaven beat Drew at Carberry Rangers 11 each. Then they beat Valley Rovers 112-9, beat Clonakilty by 2 points, beat Ballincollig by 3 points, beat Finbars by 2 points, beat Nemo Rangers by 2 points, beat Cratloe after extra time in a game where neither of them looked impressive, to be honest. Beat Rathgormack by 9 points after a very dodgy start, and beat Dingle on penalties. They have battled through, and I give them the world of credit for that, because they've showed their fighting spirit. Whereas you look at Brigid's, on the other hand, they beat Porrick Pierces in the first game, who are 2021 Connacht champions. Then they beat Dominic's 119 to 4 points. They beat Glavy's 111 to 6. They beat North Roscommon 715 to 7 points. They beat Roscommon Gales 415 to 12 points, and they beat Boyle then in the Roscommon final by a point. As I mentioned, Boyle with the Smiths in their team. In the Connacht Championship, they beat Coolera 13 points to 1-3. They then beat Mohill 1-7 to 8, and they beat Currafin 113 to 2-5 in the final. They have, on average, scored 212 and conceded 8 points every game, whereas Castlehaven have on average scored 112 and conceded 1-9 a game. So it's a lot closer on the Castlehaven side. But when we're talking about the weather and we're saying who has more experience battling through a game, it is Castlehaven. Castlehaven have had more experience battling through these games. All those stats, of course, again, shout out to Matthew, best in the game, like when it comes to them. Follow him if you don't, Gaelic Statsman. But yeah, like when you're looking at those stats, Castlehaven have battled through, but Brigid's have blitzed through most games, and they have some big names on the CV there. Beating Porrick Pierces, beating Boyle, beating Currafin. Like, that's really impressive.
It is, yeah. I suppose you have to ask as well, what stage does the fighting in Castlehaven, run out of steam? Can they do it for another 60 minutes in the probably soggy pitch and the bad weather and all that again? And it probably also, though, says a little bit about the standards in the two provinces, and maybe in the two counties, in Roscommon and Cork, where the standard in Roscommon is it's nowhere near the standard that you would get in Cork. Porrick Pierces did not have a good last 12 months or more, and have lost a couple of lads to emigration, unfortunately, as well. I play 5-a-side with one of the lads from Pierces, so you get a little bit of an insight on them as well. They haven't had the finest of months, really. Where Brigid, though, they can only beat what's in front of them. Although beating North Roscommon and scoring 7-15 is probably says a lot about some of the teams that they've had to face, whereas the Castlehaven battles against Finbars and Ballincollig, etc., and then Nemo, and then the penalties, like, it's been non-stop battles. They don't know the meaning of easing through a game, and maybe that'll stand in good stead to them, or maybe the energy burnout will kick in at some point. The nerves that you mentioned as well, probably might be a thing. I would hope that both teams would just go for it as if it was their All-Ireland final, and just go hell for leather and just try and outscore the other. And hopefully we won't end up with a defensive thing. But if Brian Stack continues the way he did for Brigid's, and marauding forward, it's going to be be good defence, but at the same time good attack play as well. And Ben O'Carroll, I didn't know that he'd scored that much. I knew it was a lot, but Jesus, that's now North Roscommon, he probably 7-15, he probably kicked a lot of it in that. But I hope we get a good game. I hope, as you said, the nerves thing, I hope it's not an impact on the game. And Brigid's will hang that thing from 2013 in the dressing room and say, right lads, this is what you're aiming for. You need to get back to this and bring Roscommon football back up to the top level as well. And Castlehaven, is it unfair on them to say that they've overachieved already in where they are? Getting out of Cork was a ridiculous achievement. Getting out of Munster against all the odds and all the penalties and everything, have they already won their All-Ireland final in many ways? Is this just a massive bonus? And, do they approach it as such and just go for it? Or do they try and, get one extra bonus game out of it in an All-Ireland final? It's hard to know. I think this is their All-Ireland final. Either way, the two of them. I don't think, realistically, I don't think either of them would beat Glen or Kilmacud in a final. But, yeah, that's for the next day, I suppose.
Well, you never know. And like a famous example that BRIGIDS maybe could take inspiration from is Roscommon. Remember 2010, Sligo took out Mayo and Galway, and we're in the Connacht final, and everyone thought Sligo are going to win, and they turned up to take the cup. Roscommon, with a certain Downey shine, absolutely stunned them in the Connacht final. And like that's what they're working with here. And the reality is that they will be both. Whatever side comes out of this game is going to be extremely confident that they can pull off an upset in the final, and with good reason, because they've battled, and both these teams have looked like they have been in big trouble at stages. Castlehaven looked like it against Dingle, and like multiple times against Dingle, and St. Brigid's looked like it against Boyle. That game was back and forth, could have gone either way. So they're both here, and they're both going to have extreme confidence they can go all the way from this point on, which then brings us on to the key decision of the game, which is indeed the official prediction. So Castlehaven or St. Brigid's. Jason, I'm going to come to you again first for this, put you on the spot. Who do you think will join one of Glen or Kilmacud Crokes in the final?
I think Brigid's, just on the experience they, will have that 2013 when they also, quite a few of the Brigid's lads there's a relations between them and Gary Castle, of course, and Westmeath side on the other side, just over the border in Westmeath, who won the All-Ireland as well a couple of years before that, before Brigid's did. So there's plenty, of rivalry and wanting to get, one up on your neighbours as well. And I had family on the Gary Castle team as well, and I know that they aren't big fans of Brigid's, and Brigid's aren't big fans of them, and they like to use that against each other. So, yeah, I think Brigid's in maybe a slightly more open, high-scoring game than the other semi-final, and maybe to win it by 4 or 5. I think maybe Castlehaven's steam train of energy will maybe just have gone one too far in this one. It'll be one too much for them, I should say, and I'll go Brigid's by 4. Hopefully.
Yeah. I think that's a fairly understandable prediction, and the truth is, Jason, either we're both right or we're both wrong, because I'm going to go with it as well. My official prediction for this semi-final between Castlehaven and St. Brigid's, I'm going to go with St. Brigid's to take it. Look, Castlehaven are warriors. They've proven that time and time again. How many times have they saved themselves from the fire, particularly in the Dingle game? It could have been 3 or 4 times in a row that they saved themselves over the course of that game. But I just feel if you look at Brigid's, they have a little bit more attacking threat. I think especially with Michael Hurley's injury, we don't know how fit Michael Hurley actually is. Ben O'Carroll has been on fire as well. And you've got players like Brian Stack, Ronan Stack, key players there at the back, and they will go on to the Hurleys. And Brian Stack just does quell whoever he goes on to. He quells their influence to some level. And I just feel like Brigid's might just be able to get over the line by 2 points. Look, it's going to be an arm wrestle. I'm going Brigid's by 2. But Castlehaven, one thing that they've proven is never ever write them off. But if you were to push me on it and say pick one, I'll lean towards Brigid's. But it'd be very interesting to see. So we'll either both be right or we'll both be wrong. It'll either be Kilmacud Castlehaven final or Brigid's Glen final, knowing our luck. Anyway, thanks very much, Jason, for coming on. Thank you to anyone that tuned in to the podcast where we previewed the All-Ireland Club football semi-finals, which will be taking place this weekend. I am going to be featuring on Gaelic Statsman Matthew Hurley's podcast at around 5:15 today. We're also going to preview the club football semi-finals as well. So make sure you tune into that. Until the next episode here on Cluiche, guys, take care.